I would like to bring up our main dish, as it were. Could we have some music and Mark Teixeira? How about a round of applause? So we're going to talk. We're just going to have a little fireside conversation and chat. We're going to, obviously, we'll talk a bit about your career as a baseball player, but also how did that prepare you for what analogs, comparisons might there be between being an elite, top-tier professional baseball player and then in the business world as you are now. So we'll move in and out of those contexts, trying to figure out how these two Bibles relate. But maybe it's good to start in the beginning. You weren't born with a silver spoon in your mouth, were you? Tell me a bit about your family. Big family.
Yeah, I grew up just outside of Baltimore, Maryland, kind of a suburb of Baltimore, Washington, Severna Park, and very middle class, just very comfortable upbringing, but had to work for everything. My dad was kind of a tough dad, but fair. When the hair got long, he'd pull it a little bit. Or when the shirt was untucked on the baseball field, he'd tap me on the shoulder. And so my dad really kind of set me up for the type of man that I wanted to be. And my mom, growing up, wow, what a sweetheart. She's in heaven now and looking down on me tonight. But she was raised Roman Catholic, the oldest daughter of 8 kids, just outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Her dad, my grandfather, served during World War II and worked in the steel mills.
Wow.
So I think you can kind of see the type of parents I had, hardworking. Nothing was ever given to me, and that was one of the main reasons that I worked so hard as an athlete growing up.
Yeah, and if you don't mind, if it's too personal, don't go there. But your faith story. So, Catholic family. Was it a family that's sort of nominally Catholic, or was Mass a central part of your routine?
Yeah, Mass was essential. We were actually just talking about it at our table tonight. It's like, did you enjoy going to Mass as a kid? No. I mean, let's be honest. Father, I love you. Father, I love you. But as a kid, it's because Mom and Dad pulled me to Mass. But as I got older, you realize how important it was.
Yeah.
I made the choice to go to an all-boys Catholic high school. It sounds crazy as a 14-year-old saying I'm going to go to an all-boys high school, but I did it because I did want and need a little bit of spiritual guidance. Mm-hmm. My parents, my dad really didn't grow up very religious,
right.
Not really going to church a lot, but my mom was the one that brought him in and really showed him how important going to church was and your relationship with Jesus Christ. My dad and my older sister, who's 3 years older than me, actually got confirmed at the same time.
Really?
So how cool is that?
Wow.
Growing up, I got to see my dad make that journey, and Lee, my beautiful wife, who is the sweetest person in the world.
Here, let's applaud again. So Mahaffey got something
well.
right.
He did. We're going to give him some credit for that.
But she was recently confirmed. Well, congratulations.
Absolutely, yeah. So my wife grew up Southern Baptist in Georgia. We met at Georgia Tech, and yeah, it is to me. Whatever gets you to Jesus Christ, right? So whether you're Catholic, whether you're Protestant, whatever it is, it's that personal relationship that my Catholic background and then meeting Lee in college and meeting friends from the South just help bring me closer to God.
Right, because to the extent we can generalize, there are some parts of the country and some Christian traditions that are more vocal about the role of Christ in one's life.
And to me, when I first got to college, we had a Bible study. I'd never been to a Bible study in my life. Now, I went to Catholic high school, and we studied the Bible. But, after practice, when we got a little note, hey, after practice Bible study, it's like, what is that? But it's a bunch of guys, 18 to 22 years old, talking about real things, talking about what you struggle with, and how you can go to the Bible for some answers.
Now, you also have an uncle, if I recall, who's a priest. Tell me a bit about him, because he's played a role in your life, hasn't he?
My Uncle Chuck, Charles Canterna, the oldest of the 8 children, is a Catholic priest in Baltimore, and he's affectionately known as the street priest. So he goes out, his entire life has been going out onto the streets and ministering to the homeless. And so his 2 main ministries are the homeless and prisoners. So you talk about a man who is fed by the Lord, literally fed by the Lord. Lee will tell you, there's times that we get together with the family and Uncle Chuck's there, and we say, Uncle Chuck, when was the last time you ate? And he kind of goes, I ate yesterday morning. Wow. Because the Lord just fills him. And that type of spiritual guidance for me as a kid and as a man now, Uncle Chuck just turned 70, is so important because talk about the most humble of men. our example of Jesus Christ, he is living that life. I mean, he is living it to a T, and it's great to have him in our family.
Well, because a lot of families don't grow up with those sort of examples or role models and so forth. I mean, did you meet some of the guys that you played ball with over the years that didn't have that and thought you were kind of crazy to care about this question?
Yeah, I think as you get older and you start realizing that everyone isn't like you, right? I mean, you went all boys Catholic high school. Everyone's kind of in the same boat. Your parents sent you to this high school for a certain type of education. You're 14 to 18 years old, and there's not a lot of crazy things thrown at you. You go to college, same thing. Everyone's there on either a baseball scholarship or is good enough to walk on to a place like Georgia Tech, and all kind of in the same boat in life. It wasn't until I went to the minor leagues and just Dominican Republic, Japan, Chinese Taipei, all these different countries, not to mention the rest of our country
sure.
that is represented in minor league baseball, and kids from all over, kids from the poorest of the poor country, the poorest of the poor in the United States, and kids like me that went to Catholic school and saying, hey, you going to go to church Sunday? So you get to meet a lot of different people and be able to experience different lives.
Yeah. Well, sometimes also if someone has, as sociologists call it, a different social location, they see the world differently. And if you grew up in a poor place, you're going to read the Bible through a different lens than if you grew up in an affluent place. Fast forward a bit. We chatted about this the other day. We live in an affluent zip code. You've been financially successful in addition to on your field that's been rewarded financially. How do you think about raising kids when you have a high disposable income on a high net worth?
That's such a great question. It's something that we struggle with as a family and as ball players. When I was playing, a lot of my Christian brothers struggled with. But the way I look at it is God put everybody in the position that they're supposed to be in. It's up to us to minister and to be a good person in that position. Yeah. So if God puts you on the New York Yankees, you better be the best Christian and the best man possible on the New York Yankees. If he puts you on the street, as a guy who's just saying, hey, love Jesus when you walk down Manhattan, hey, God's putting him there for a reason. Yeah. And that's the way that I've kind of looked at my career. I've been blessed far beyond anything I can ever imagine. Yeah. How am I going to use those blessings to serve God?
Yeah. Well, and part of that, and if this is too personal, don't go there, but if I recall, when you were in high school, one of your friends died, and that impacted a lot of your life. Do you mind sharing something?
Absolutely. We had 6 guys in high school that kind of did everything together. We all lived close. We played similar sports, and would go to maybe carpool together, kind of do everything. We were so cool. We called ourselves a 6-pack. I did have a beer or two in high school. We thought we were the coolest kids.
Actually, that's not a bad nickname. There you go.
No, we were really fun. But anyway, unfortunately, one of my friends was on his way. This is during the day. It was 11 or 12 o'clock in the morning, and he was driving to Six Flags and stopped on the side of the road, and a tractor trailer hit him and was killed at 16 years old. And you talk about a phone call you don't want to get, and just the friends that rallied around his family, the bond that we created through that, and just kind of the idea that we're not invincible. And if you don't know who God is, you better start looking.
So you were actually thinking that back then?
Absolutely. At 16, we didn't have the answers. I don't have the answers now, right? I'm still searching for the answers. But at 16, you think you're invincible, and you think that everything you do, there's no consequences and whatever. And I think that made me grow up real fast. And still to this day, we're friends with my friend Nick, his parents. We see them pretty much once a year at either Thanksgiving or Christmas. And Mr. Larry, Larry and Pat Liberatore used to have us over for meatballs. He's Italian. I'm half Italian, so I love my Italian food. And every Wednesday night for from the time it happened our junior year through senior year of high school, we went over to Miss Pat and Mr. Larry's for meatballs. And just that fellowship and helping them, it was therapy for us. It was therapy for them. And I started a scholarship in his name for our high school, and so now every senior that rises from Mount St. Joe High School in Baltimore gets a Nick Liberatore scholarship, and it's $5,000 or $10,000 a year to kind of help you get going towards college and books and computer or whatever it might be. So David and Cynthia, when I see you guys are doing, it's like, man, amen. That's it's just an amazing thing that you guys are doing. So I love it and thank you.
Well, and it is something how what might seem like a small gesture is world changing for some people.
It is, and I think what we have to understand is that everyone sees God through different eyes, right? I have a very unique perspective in life because what I did for a living. God blessed me to play baseball, and I got to play baseball. Other people just need a chance, just like a little chance to get ahead. Yeah. And whether it's $100 or $1,000 or $10,000 to get you to college or to maybe fill out an application, that's very meaningful in certain people's lives. And so any chance you get to make a difference, I take advantage of that.
I was thinking, it sounds like you're growing up played a huge role in shaping and informing who you've become as a man. And you've talked about your uncle. He's done some other special things with you. Could you tell me a bit about that? Yeah.
So my Uncle Chuck, he was one of those guys that never wanted any credit. He was a guy that when he went out to the poor, he didn't tell people what he was doing. He just did it. And I'd call him up and I'd ask him for advice, and I'd say, "Hey, Lee's on the phone too. Can you talk to us?" And so Uncle Chuck for me is one of those guys that when you look at really who we're supposed to be, when you're not that man that God wants you to be, you call Uncle Chuck. Right, and we all need.
Do you mind giving me his number?
Yeah, right. He was there at my mom's deathbed. The peace that we felt when my mom passed away, like that's powerful, And when you don't have that faith and you don't have that connection to God, and you lose somebody, there's a lot of darkness, and there's a lot of darkness in the world. But Uncle Chuck's like, praise the Lord. Margie's going home. That's the peace that I had during that time, and Uncle Chuck was with us every step of the way.
There's one of the great biblical metaphors is God or Christ as light, and that light conquers darkness. It illuminates. It's truth. It's healing. It sounds like he was that big light for you.
Absolutely, and again, with all the darkness, all it takes is a little bit of light. I remember we went to a senior retreat, and we turned off all the lights, and it was probably, I think, half the senior class was in one room and half was in another room. And you kind of switch off what the message was. And they turn off all the lights and pitch black, no windows. And then, but we were all given a candle, and then one match is struck, one candle is lit, and from that darkness, just that one little match lit up the entire room. And it's like, that's God, But you have to go to other people. You have to light those candles around to your community, to your brothers, to your friends, family, whatever it might be. And at the end of it, the room is lit up. And that's a great metaphor that I use with my kids. I use with friends going through tough times. And if there's a little bit of faith left in there, or a little bit of light in your life, use that to really get somewhere.
I'm thinking of another person you mentioned once when you were living and playing in Texas, if I recall, that there's a pastor, McQuaid.
Yeah,
and
Pastor
he's
Andy
touched
McQuaid.
Your life. Share some stories there, because I was struck by some of them.
Growing up Catholic and marrying a Baptist woman from South Georgia.
So it's an interfaith marriage.
Yeah. We were always open to new churches, or hey, there's a great priest here, or there's a great pastor here, or so we heard of Pastor Andy McQuaid at Irving Bible Church, and Irving Bible Church was 15 minutes from our house. We had some friends in the neighborhood that went there, and so I said, "Oh, this is great. Let's go to Irving Bible." And so we went once, fell in love with it, and because of the friendships that Pastor Andy had, we went over to a buddy's house and had wine and cigars and talked about God. And I'm like, man, you can talk about God anywhere. You can sit on the back porch. You can sit on the back porch, and you can, put your feet up, and you can have a glass of wine, and you can talk about how much God loves you and what God means to you. That meant a lot, because
had you always sort of had more formal sense?
Much more formal,
sort of
much more formal.
And stiff, yeah.
Unfortunately, I think some people think of God as like a buzzkill or a joy kill. It's like, no, it's the opposite. When you really get to know who God is and how much He loves you, it's just the most fun you can have, and it's the most joyful thing you can have. And so, Andy, you meet these people in your life that just give you a different perspective on who God is, and it was very very important for me. And Andy went through a lot in his life. He had stage 3 cancer at one point. He was doing a Bible study with literally 3 days after surgery with all of the tubes and everything hooked up, but he said, I'm still doing Bible study. And it's like, man, you're a stud, first of all. But thank you, right? Thank you for serving us while you're in so much pain.
I think if I recall, he also wrote a book, or at least talked about how do you, as a person of faith, in this case as a Christian, how do you engage the secular world? Because if you're with people who are more or less on the same page, they're fine when you use sort of religious Godspeak. But there are a lot of places where that's verboten. It's just not the done thing. And he helped you a bit with that. Share that if you don't mind.
It's really easy to preach to the choir, right? In this room, I think everyone's here for a reason. We all are, either are searching for God, pursuing God, but know who God is. There's a lot of people that don't even know who God is. And when you meet those people, that's a challenge, right? And so I think for me, Andy wrote this book. For me is talk about life through God's eyes, right? And we can't change the world in 1 second and say, hey, this is God. And all right, now you're healed, or now you're whatever.
Yeah, it's not a simple formula.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But, and Andy uses these words. He says, play the music of the gospel and have somebody ask for the words. And that makes a lot of sense. So just play the music. Be a light. Be a good person. Be joyful. And then someone's going to ask you, why are you like this? Or you talk about God a lot. Give me a little bit more. Because I think one thing that's put off in this secular world is, hey, I'm Mark, nice to meet you. Are you saved? It's like, whoa, that's, and some people are good at that.
Do they mean safe at first base?
Yeah, not safe,
saved.
Sorry.
And not at your first base, pal. They're out.
and I'm not good at that. I am, Lee and I talk about it all the time.
Yeah.
You have to preach the gospel every day and use words when necessary.
Yeah. Which is one of the great Catholic saints who said that as well. So when you're let's talk a bit about your baseball days. As Michael mentioned in the introduction, that on your travel team, you would start Bible studies in enemy territory, so to speak. I mean, did your players think, oh, Mark is just nuts? Or how did that work out? And what was the fruit of that time?
Yeah, we were blessed that every team I was on had a 5 to 15 person group of guys that either would go to chapel, go to church, and chapel is, we play every Sunday, right? So chapel is baseball chapel. It's a great organization. It's in the minor leagues and the major leagues. And, for 20 minutes, either before batting practice, after batting practice, depending if you're home on the road, you'd have a pastor come in and we just do one verse, one verse and attack it and really kind of, pray for each other, and that is your...
Sorry, is that you and the other team?
No, it's separate.
Okay,
so
no, I didn't know.
Yeah, it's separate.
Worth checking that out, okay.
The joke is, it's like, you didn't pray for them, did you? It's like, you're only praying for us, right? But
home team advantage.
So we only got, very difficult to go to Mass, almost all day games on Sunday. You have to be there at 9 o'clock. I went to bed at midnight or 1 o'clock the night before. So baseball chapel was very important to me. So we get that baseball chapel group together on Sunday. And I'd say, hey, guys, Tuesday in my room, whatever, 405, whatever it is, we got Bible study. And I was, the first probably 5 years, it was DVDs. And it was like, buy the book, you go on the internet and you order a Bible study. After a while, we started getting into a little rhythm, and so I'd ask Andy Pettit or I'd ask Mariano Rivera, whoever. I'd be like, "What do you guys want to tackle this week?"
So pick a theme first that might have been relevant,
Exactly.
a struggle or something in their lives.
And the power of when you're in that clubhouse and there's media around, and God forbid you talk about Jesus Christ in front of the media, you have to keep relatively quiet in the public spaces.
Sure.
But when you're with your brothers and you're sitting next to your locker, you can talk about God, and it's like, hey, we're gonna dive into that at Bible study.
Yeah.
And so whatever maybe a teammate was going through, whatever something that was happening in the world at the time, we'd kind of take that theme and attack it at Bible study that week.
Can you think of one that you put up that, as you look back over the years, that was just like hit home for you somehow?
Family issues. Like I was blessed with two parents that loved me and took me to church. Not every everybody is in that boat. And it's almost probably more guys in baseball are not in that boat. And we talked about family a lot. And, we'd have guys just start breaking down crying. This is, big, strong Major League Baseball players breaking down crying because they just talked about something happened with their mom or dad or whatever. And they never talked about it. Never talked about it. And so that's the comfort that we wanted to bring. And that usually didn't happen in April. It was usually towards the end of the season when you felt comfortable about who you were with. And
you had logged hours together.
Yeah, but there were some powerful moments in those Bible studies. Just kind of having guys for the first time in their lives talk about things that they were going through.
Yeah. Part of the what we talk about at GLF is this phenomenon. How do I stay ethically fresh? How do I, as St. Paul would say, he says, I do that which I know I ought not to do. So how do we not do that which I know I ought to do? And do you have a mantra or something that helps keep you, like when you might just be inclined to go with the guys in something that probably you shouldn't, or could lead to something that you just don't want to be near? Do you have a mantra, or how's your faith help you there?
Yeah, and I learned it at 26. And again, I'm still learning and still searching. And I think one of the things I tell everybody when I talk about my faith is I'm no better than anybody here. I just play baseball, and you'll listen to me. And really, if you think about it, I mean, I need Jesus, I need saving, I need spiritual counseling, I need all of the above. But because I played Major League Baseball, I actually have a forum to get up and talk. So not that I figured it out, but I realized something at 26. Our youngest son was born. And when he was born, I just had this huge wave of emotion and guilt and all these things. I'm like, I've been so selfish my entire life. God's been calling me to serve others. It's in the Bible. Every chapter, it's in the Bible.
You can't miss it.
And I've been serving myself my entire life. And even though I went to church, and even though I understood who God was, I wasn't really following Jesus Christ the way that I was supposed to. But when
That's
I was
a pretty big admission, though.
Yeah, and you have to be honest with yourself, right? And Lee and I talked about it a lot. And I think one of the things that I realized was I had always been very laser focused at my job and baseball. People that know me know that, like, I have, I put blinders on when I have a task, and I'll finish that task no matter what. And that worked for a baseball career. Didn't necessarily work for a Christian life. And what I was doing is I was putting God in a box. I was saying, okay, when I need you, God, on Sunday, or when there's pain or when there's hurt or whatever, I'll go to you and I'll pray and I will be a Christian, godly man. But the rest of my life, baseball, boom, I was on my own. Relationships with friends, on my own. Businesses that I was involved in, on my own. And I realized that when you have a child, you better bring that child to God's box. Because you need him every single step of the way. I mean, we bring him home and it's like, what do we do now? Let's ask God what to do. And that was a wake-up call for me that, don't put God in the box. Don't go to him when you need him. Live in that box. And I think I've tried to do that, obviously falter all the time. Every day, you say something you shouldn't, you think something you shouldn't. But as long as you have God with you, the Holy Spirit's with you at all times. And I think at 26, when Jack was born, it's like, okay, I'm starting to get it now.
And didn't you, I wrote down once, we were chatting once, keep Jesus as a part of everything you do. You said that several times in the conversation. Is that kind of what, this is your mantra?
Yeah,
in a way,
you've seen those WWJD bracelets, What Would Jesus Do? And I went to college in Georgia, and they were everywhere. And I'd never even seen one. Really, I'd never even seen one.
That's all right. I haven't seen a lot of Princeton either. So.
Yeah. And so I had Matthew Swain, a walk-on kid from South Georgia, and I said, what is that? He's like, what would Jesus do? He's like, what do you mean, what would Jesus do? It's like, this reminds me, every decision I have to make, what would Jesus do? I'm like, that's really simple. Like, but I'm in college, and it's like, Jesus definitely wouldn't do that, so I'm going to take it off right now. But as you get older, and you have responsibilities, and you have children, and you have a wife that loves you don't want to let down, man, that works. It absolutely works. And so while I don't wear one, I have it right in my top drawer of my desk. My mom used to put crucifixes all over our house. We have crucifixes everywhere. And you just need those constant reminders that everything you're doing, God is with you. And try to make the decisions based on God telling you what to do.
So one thing that I suspect might be a question in some people's minds, and frankly it's been in my mind more when I was younger than now, but the TV, sometimes they edit it out, but after someone makes the amazing home run, like your number 409 grand slam, wow, amazing. Point Jesus, I want to give the interview. I want to give thanks to my Lord and Savior Jesus, and you could tell the interviewer often feels a little awkward. Sometimes it gets edited out. How do you respond to the cynic who would say, "Wait, is God really supporting the Yankees? How about maybe the Red Sox or whatever, based on where you live?"
Yeah.
So, and I know we're in the edge of Red Sox territory, so some people might have been a little uneasy all evening. But how do you think about that? Because I know you pray when you play.
Yep.
But what about this thing? Whose side is God really on?
Yeah. Well, God's on all of our side. God does not care if the Yankees or Red Sox win. But I think.
Do you want to repeat that?
But I think the issue is first of all, do you mean it? Because you can't fool God. God. I saw plenty of guys playing, and I knew exactly what they were doing at nights and away from their families, and then they're doing this when they hit a home run. I'm like,
a little disconnect.
Okay, but also, listen, we live in a world where God has been taken out of everything. You can't talk about God at public schools. You can't talk about God on TV.
By the way, you might be. We were talking. Tom Galbraith was saying there's a recent, the HBO series Silicon Valley. That there was a short version of a long skit they just did. Is a guy got outed for being a Christian, and it ruined his career. And it's sort of like it would have been easier if he had been outed for a sexual orientation or something else.
It's sad. It's sad but true, though. I mean, we can't be public about our faith. So any way that you can show it, any way that you can slip it in there without being chastised for it. I know God tells you. It's one of the things I struggle with. God tells you to always stand up for me.
Yeah.
I'm saying, God, I'm too weak. I can't always stand up for you.
So when you do pray on the field, because in fact you were saying in the World Series that you folks won, you said you prayed more during that game, number 6.
Game 6, I probably prayed more during Game 6 of the World Series in 2009, the clinching game, than I had the entire season combined. I didn't pray a ton on the field. I wasn't a guy that prayed for myself, for success.
Okay.
I always said I said a prayer during national anthem every day because I knew that during the national anthem I had a minute to really just focus. Okay, boom, a minute. I'm going to get my prayers in, and I know if I didn't do it in the morning or if I didn't do it at night because we're traveling or whatever, at the very least I was getting a minute in during the national anthem. But during the game, once the game started, I didn't pray for myself. I just I went out there and said, God, I'm going to go do this, and whether I fail or succeed, I'm going to live with it. But during that game, I was asking. I was asking for success during that game.
And praying for Mariano to bring it home, right?
And once Mo came in, everything was good. It's like the prayers were answered. That means you had a lead.
So let's shift from this marvelous chapter of your life, which you worked so hard at, and particularly towards the end with a lot of injuries and battling back. Tell me, what are some lessons that apply? Because you're a businessman now. You're an investor. You actively, you're in the juice business. You've got the investment going down in Atlanta and the urban center. Talk a bit about some of the life lessons that sport and or your faith taught you about being a decent businessman.
Yeah, I mean, I think the best thing that ever happened to me from a business standpoint is I played for the Yankees because I had an 8-year internship in New York City. And honestly, people think I'm joking.
I got to wear pinstripe suits.
I got to meet the smartest, most successful, most talented businessmen and women in New York for the last 8 years, or 10 years.
Yeah.
And I was a fly on the wall. I kind of humbled myself. I think that's where my faith came in. I didn't go into a meeting at Blackstone or Goldman Sachs thinking I knew everything. I knew nothing going into those meetings. And I would be quiet. Guys would ask me funny stuff about baseball or whatever, and I'd be quiet. And they'd say, hey, Tex, where are you guys going next? And I would just listen. And I think that humility of knowing that you don't have all the answers. I think a lot of athletes get in trouble because they were all-stars, they made millions of dollars, and they go into the business world and go, I got this, No, wait, this really smart CEO's telling me not to buy that? Oh, forget, I know what I'm doing. You just lost $500,000 on a dumb.
Yeah.
That happens all the time. And so I think what I learned in New York was if you don't know what you're doing, like if you don't really know what you're doing, surround yourself with really smart people and take their advice. And that's, your Christian faith, right? Like, hey, you need to surround yourself with other believers because you don't have all the answers. Sometimes you struggle. Sometimes you need that support. And it's a very similar idea, in church or in business.
So when you had the cameo appearance on the show Billions, which some people who are in the hedge fund industry in this room might have watched, did you get any investment from Damien as a result of talking about Juice Press?
No, you know what? That was a really funny thing. David Levine, who I'm sure some of you know, lives here in Greenwich. We saw each other at dinner at Harvest one night, and he's like, "Hey, I've been meaning to call you. I've got a perfect cameo for you." And so we talked about, okay, this is what we're going to do, and we're going to be at a charity event. And this happens all the time, by the way. I'm at a charity event. A guy comes up with his son, and he's a big fan. You sign it, take a picture. The kid's got a big smile. And you kind of, so I told David, I was like, this is exactly what I do. But what he had kind of written down wasn't something that I would even say. I said, David, I need this to be real. I was like, what if we talk about Juice Press? What if we and a little, I call it guerrilla marketing, throw your name out there. And it's like, okay, like I'm going to get out there and show people who I am. But this is really me. And if I was at a charity event, I'd talk about Juice Press. I'd be like, hey, you should hear about this thing. It's really cool. And,
it's one of his investments, right?
Yeah. Anybody that wants to go to Juice Press on Greenwich Avenue, it's a great place. It's healthy. But yeah, so that was a lot of fun.
And tell me, as you talk about learning from wise people and business people, Ray Dalio, his book Principles. There's a couple things in there that struck you as well.
What a great book. So everyone has principles. Some people don't write them down, right? I mean, we all live by certain principles. And
they get it on one page.
Yeah, I thought it was really cool that Ray did that, and he's been doing it, his entire business career. And the one thing that stuck out at me that I've learned about myself is the meritocracy thing, and know what you're good at, know what you're good at. Surround yourself with people that compliment you. And if you think about it, it's like a baseball team. If our entire team was first basemen that were slow but hit home runs, we wouldn't be that good of a team. If your entire team was little fast guys that ran around the bases but bunted all the time, you wouldn't be very good. And so Ray's book kind of reaffirmed what I thought. But yeah, this makes a lot of sense. You have 4 or 5 business partners. They can't all be like you. All your employees can't be type A. All your employees can't be highly emotional. Like you have to have a really good mix of people. And Ray just does a great job of laying it out and in a way that you can understand it.
So how do you figure out, as you're seeking to surround yourself with smart people, how do you discern if they have integrity, character? Because that's central to who you are. Yeah,
you have to spend time with them. I mean, I think you can't read about someone's heart or you can't read about someone's character in the Wall Street Journal. Right? So for me, it's really spending time. I call it social commerce. And social commerce is playing around a golf, going to a ball game together, going to dinner together, and really getting to know somebody. I mean, if I'm at a business dinner and people know how important my faith is.
Because they're coming to you also as your image, right? You're the guy, you're the baseball star.
Well, and sometimes I'm going after them. I mean, remember, we're in New York now.
True.
There's a lot of people way more important than I am. And so whatever the dynamic is, if I am looking at a business opportunity or a partner or hiring somebody, whatever it might be, and we go to dinner and the whole time he's talking about stuff that don't match up with my values, probably not a good guy to bring on. Might be the smartest guy in the room. Probably not a good guy to bring on, because at the end of the day, there's a lot of really good people that are also smart. And I'd rather find the really good person that can get the job done.
I've heard story, and I'm sure you in the room have as well, story after story of business deals that looked good on the surface, maybe were totally legal, but the counterparty ultimately was just not fully trustable. And all those led to lots of pain, usually lawsuits, loss of money. So if you could figure out how to identify that.
Yeah, that's why GLF is so important. When Michael told me about GLF a couple of years ago, I'm like, yes, that's what you need. I mean, I wish baseball had a GLF. There's a lot of darkness out there, and if you can surround yourself with people that believe in the GLF mission, you can start connecting dots to some really good people in business.
You mentioned playing golf, which is now a big part of your pleasure time. If you look back of your business career these past couple of years and earlier investments you made, are there any mulligans that you have that
Absolutely.
you wish you could, and any that you're willing to share
I won't name the company.
Not just a bad business investment, but where something where there might have been an ethical component or...
I never got involved with anything. Like, if something sounded too good to be true and could be illegal, it probably is.
Yeah, it's a good old rule, isn't it?
I remember before the Madoff days, I was sitting in Dallas at the golf course, and a bunch of the old guys were talking about investments and this and that. And again, I'm listening. And they're like, I got this guy up in New York. He never loses. He's up 15 to 23% every year. And it's like, okay. And I called my financial advisor and said, man, there's this great guy. And he's like, no, don't. He goes, if it sounds too good to be true, it's too good to be true. Yeah. And I have there's a mulligan in a private equity deal that I did just because I think I got greedy. I think I looked at, man, this thing could be huge. And you looked at the end rather than really the principles of the business. It's like a baseball season, right? If you talk about the World Series in spring training, and that's all you're talking about, you're going to miss the entire journey. And like, hey, congratulations, you got off to a really good start. And because you didn't prepare, because you didn't, take care of yourself, whatever it might be, because you weren't focusing on the April 3rd game in Minnesota, you didn't get to the World Series. So that's a really good lesson that I learned.
There's an author who just came out with a book that talks about performance, and he works with high-powered executives and elite athletes, yourself. And in his research, he finds there's two kind of indicators of success. There's performance characteristics and personal characteristics. And he said that empirically, that particularly in team sports more than individual sports, I don't know if this is true, he says it is, that it's easier to have what he calls bracketed morality. So that when you're on a team, if your sole goal is to win at all costs, that you might be more likely to slip into behaviors or make decisions or cross that line or the slippery slope and cheat or whatever it might be. Having heard that for the first time as a proposition, do you think that holds? Do you think there is a mentality sometimes we think of Lance Armstrong and others that will do anything to win because their personal characteristics aren't as high as their performance characteristics?
Absolutely. That is the easiest yes that you can ask me. I mean, unfortunately, I played a sport where dozens, maybe hundreds of our best players took steroids. Yeah. And, I did an interview today. I do the Michael Kay show every Thursday. They asked, are you surprised that Robinson Cano got popped for steroids? I said, no, I'm not surprised. Because, first of all, you're paying me to be honest. So honestly, I wasn't surprised because so many guys had done it. You have an opportunity to make a whole lot of money, have fame, whatever it might be. And if someone gives you something, whether it's an inside tip in business, in the stock market, or gives you a pill or whatever it might be, and you don't have that moral compass, you're going to take it. Yeah. That's just, if you care more about winning than your soul, you're going to do whatever it takes to win that game. And it's very difficult sometimes to talk about because I have a lot of friends that have gotten in trouble because of steroids.
Well, and it's tricky, too, also, whether it's steroids or other things, other modes of cheating, just to use that as one of many examples, of also, let's say you're not doing it, but one of your buddies is. And do you call him out? Do you take him aside and say, hey, you got to cut that out? Or do you just keep your nose clean and just ignore it? That's
really tough, yeah. It never got to the point. My good friends I never had a good friend, like a good friend, that ever either got in trouble or I ever thought. And maybe that was subconsciously. I didn't surround myself with those guys. Maybe I got lucky. Yeah. But that kind of wasn't how it worked in baseball. Like if you called out a teammate or tried to, that would sever a relationship, and he'd basically say, you're not trying to win. That's, you watch Billions, right? What's Billions all about? It's about that team trying to win, and if one guy is playing by the book, he's getting ousted. Yeah. Look at poor Spiros, right? You guys watch? I mean, it's like, you get out of here. Yeah. And how was he accepted back in? Started cheating. Spoiler alert, sorry. But that's baseball. Yeah. Unfortunately, not everyone's doing it. Please don't get me wrong. But the few guys per team that were or that still are, they're going to look at you and say, "Well, you don't care about this team. You don't want to win a World Series," and that's very difficult.
Well, it's a huge thing. When I talk with my students, this question of like you need to be loyal to your team, to your company, to the group you're working with, and yet what do you do when you encounter something that you know is foul? You know it's out of play and you shouldn't do it. And the moral courage to speak up against that, and how do you do it without? And sometimes it may cost you your career.
And we weigh, and it's very difficult. Again, we weigh collateral damage, right? The collateral damage of if you work at a big Wall Street firm of somebody cheating has layers that are just. So yeah, you go to your compliance officer and say boom, 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 boom. We had it at Georgia Tech. We had a compliance officer. So if you heard of anybody that was taking money from a booster, you had to, and that happened. I mean, but in baseball there is no compliance officer, and we could, you can talk about it. There's a lot of morally corrupt guys in sports as well as business.
Yeah.
The collateral damage is less though in sports because it's usually a person. They don't take away your World Series.
Yeah.
They don't take away your franchise doesn't get moved out of New York.
Yeah.
But in business, on Wall Street, if your head guy is cheating, there are ripples throughout the entire country.
Oh yeah, no, and pension funds and lives can be ruined. It's real stakes. Well, think of education as well. The University of Michigan is just hit with
Michigan State.
Michigan State.
18% of their endowment.
Yeah. $500 million price tag for something which a lot of people knew were going on, I'm sure, and no one did anything. Look, I want to ask you one last question and then move us to wrap up. And the question is, I heard you in an interview once, someone talked about you being a self-made man, and you pushed back, and you said, no, I'm not. And yet, I know a little bit about professional sports, and you worked your tail off since you were a kid, the hours, the sacrifices, the dedication, the diligence. So you could argue, well, you were a self-made man, but you don't like that label. Why is that?
I do not like that label at all. None of us are self-made, right? I mean, I got to play baseball because God gave me an incredible gift. And if without that gift, I don't get to play, Major League Baseball and don't get to have the success that I have. So it's God gave me this huge gift, and I just worked hard. And everyone works hard, or most people work hard, but they weren't given my ability to play baseball. And so when people say self-made, I'm like, not even close. It is because of the grace of God and the gifts that God has given me that I was able to play baseball and have the career that I had. And I think that forms that kind of humility. We always have to stay humble, because that humility allows you to appreciate what you have, work hard for it, and then knowing when it gets taken away, hey, you did everything you could. You had a good ride. So I definitely push back on that one.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I'm going to close, and we'll give Mark a round of applause. But you said something, as I think you've said it a couple times, but you said it when you retired, your retirement speech, and in a couple interviews. And I'm just going to read this quote. You said, "On the field, I just want to be." You were asked how were you going to reflect in your career, all these accolades and Golden Gloves and everything you want. On the field, I just want to be known as a switch hitter with power. I played good defense, and I played the game the right way. I played the game the right way. How about we all give a round of applause for Mark Teixeira, who's playing the game the right way.
Thank you so much.